The dust hung heavy in the autumn air as Daisy O'Malley clutched her bruised side. Stumbling down the rutted path that led away from the homestead she'd called her prison for the past year. Behind her, the angry shouts of Edgar Whitman echoed through the pines, each threat sending jolts of fear through her weary body. It was 1876, and in the untamed territories of western Wyoming, a woman alone had few allies and even fewer choices. Daisy had not planned to run today. At 19, she had endured Edgar's increasing rage for months, watching the man she had married transform from charming businessman to violent drunk. But when his fist had connected with her stomach, after discovering her secret, the child growing within her, something inside her, had finally broken. With nothing but the clothes on her back and a small pouch of coins saved from selling eggs at the Sunday market, she had fled while he passed out from whiskey and rage. The autumn chill cut through her thin cotton dress as the road wound toward the town of Whispering Creek. Each step sent pain through her ribs, but the thought of what lay behind drove her forward. Daisy had no plan beyond reaching town, perhaps finding work at the hotel or convincing the stagecoach driver to take her east anywhere away from Edgar's reach. As the sun began its westward descent, the sound of approaching hoofbeats froze her in place. A rider appeared around the bend, his silhouette tall against the burnished sky. Daisy ducked behind a stand of junipers, heart hammering in her chest. The rider slowed, surveying the road ahead, then turned his mount toward the trees where she hid. "Madam," his voice carried through the stillness. "You all right there?" Daisy remained silent, weighing her options. The man dismounted, approaching slowly with his hands visible. "I don't mean you no harm, saw you from the ridge." His voice was deep but gentle. "You're bleeding." Daisy touched her lip, suddenly aware of the metallic taste in her mouth. She stepped cautiously from behind the trees, ready to run if necessary. The man before her wore a weathered duster, his dark hat pulled low over eyes that studied her with concern rather than threat. His face was sun-browned and serious, with a scar running along his jawline that spoke of a life lived hard. "I'm Quinn Keller," he said, keeping his distance. "Most folks call me Quinn." "I'm fine," Daisy managed, though her voice betrayed her. "Just heading to town." Quinn Keller studied her face, taking in the fresh bruises and torn sleeve. His expression hardened, but not toward her. "Town's 5 miles yet," he said. "My ranch is just over that rise. Got a cook who could fix you something while I saddle a fresh horse to take you the rest of the way." Daisy hesitated. Every instinct warned against trusting any man, but exhaustion and hunger were quickly becoming as dangerous as the husband she'd fled. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Quinn shrugged. "Same reason anyone ought to, it's the right thing." Something in his straightforward manner eased her fear. When he offered his canteen, she accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she said, taking a careful sip. "You got family in town?" he asked. Daisy shook her head. "No, no one," Quinn nodded as if coming to a decision. "Well, offer stands, food, rest, then town if that's where you're set on going." The light was fading fast, and Daisy knew the dangers of being caught on the road after dark. With a careful nod, she accepted. "I'm Daisy," she said. "Daisy O'Malley." Quinn helped her onto his horse, careful not to touch her more than necessary, then led the animal on foot toward his property. Neither spoke as they traveled, but Daisy felt his occasional glance, assessing her condition rather than her person. The rocking K ranch appeared modest, but well-maintained, a main house of hewn logs, a barn, and several outbuildings. A weathered sign hung above the gate, the letter K branded into the wood. Smoke curled from the chimney, promising warmth that Daisy hadn't felt in months. An older Mexican woman emerged from the house as they approached, her expression shifting from curiosity to concern as she took in Daisy's appearance. "Elena," Quinn called. "This lady needs some tending to." Elena nodded, already moving toward them. "Come, Senora, inside now." The warmth of the kitchen enveloped Daisy like an embrace as Elena guided her to a chair near the fire. The woman worked silently, bringing water for washing, then stew and bread that smelled better than anything Daisy could remember. Quinn disappeared outside, giving her space that felt like respect rather than abandonment. "He is a good man," Alina said as she placed a cup of tea before Daisy. "Not like some." Daisy stared into the steaming cup. "I'm afraid I've made a terrible mistake in coming here." "My husband is the one who did this." Alina gestured to Daisy's face. Daisy nodded, tears threatening. "Then you made no mistake in leaving," Alina said firmly. "Rest now. Tomorrow is soon enough for decisions." When Quinn returned, he brought clean blankets and news that a room had been prepared in the small cabin where Alina lived, just behind the main house. "You'll have privacy there," he explained, keeping a respectful distance. "I've sent one of my hands to town to let the sheriff know there's trouble. If your husband comes looking, he won't find you unprepared." The simple kindness of his words broke something in Daisy, and tears she'd held back for months spilled down her cheeks. Through them, she saw not pity in Quinn's eyes, but a quiet anger that wasn't directed at her. "Why?" she asked again. "You don't know me." Quinn considered her question seriously before answering. "My mother died running from a man who should have protected her. I was 12, watching from the hayloft when he caught her." His voice remained steady, but his hands tightened on his belt. "No one helped her then. Maybe helping you now makes that right somehow." In that moment, Daisy saw him clearly, not just the capable rancher, but the boy who had witnessed something no child should see. She nodded, understanding the ghosts that drove him. "Thank you," she whispered. That night, in the clean bed in Alina's cabin, Daisy slept deeply for the first time in months, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. Morning brought clarity and fear. Daisy knew Edgar would not simply let her disappear. He'd invested too much in the facade of their marriage, presenting himself to the town as a successful businessman with a devoted young wife. Her leaving would damage that carefully crafted image, and Edgar Whitman did not tolerate damage to things he considered his property. Quinn found her at the kitchen table, helping Alina prepare breakfast. He paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of her with her hair loosely braided and wearing a simple dress Alina had provided. "Morning," he said, removing his hat. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Daisy admitted. "But I should continue to town. I don't want to bring trouble to your door." Quinn accepted the coffee Alina offered but remained standing. "Trouble's already looking for you, I expect. Sheriff Morgan rode out at first light. Your husband reported you missing, claimed you were confused and in a delicate condition." Daisy's hand went instinctively to her stomach. "He knows," she whispered. Quinn's eyes followed her movement, understanding dawning in his expression. "The baby is his?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Daisy said, voice strengthening with resolve. "But I won't let my child grow up with a father who solves every problem with his fists." Sheriff Morgan arrived an hour later, a gruff man with observant eyes who took in Daisy's bruises without comment. When Quinn led them to his study for privacy, the sheriff removed his hat and spoke directly. "Mrs. Whitman, your husband is quite concerned about your whereabouts." "It's O'Malley," Daisy corrected. "I'm keeping my family name." The sheriff raised an eyebrow but continued. "He claims you wandered off in a state of confusion due to your condition." "The only confusion I suffered was believing he would change," Daisy replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Sheriff, I left because he struck me when I told him about the baby. It wasn't the first time he'd used his fists, but I decided it would be the last time he used them on me." Sheriff Morgan's weathered face remained neutral. "That's a serious accusation, madam. It's the truth," she insisted, "and I have the marks to prove it." The sheriff studied her, then turned to Quinn. "Keller, what's your interest in this matter?" Quinn met his gaze directly. "Just offering shelter to someone who needed it, Sheriff, same as you do." Something passed between the men, an understanding born of years living in the same harsh territory. "Well," the sheriff said finally, "legally, a husband has certain rights, but I've had my concerns about Whitman for some time. Too quick to anger when the deals don't go his way." He turned back to Daisy. I can't stop him from looking for you, but I won't be helping him find you either, not until I'm convinced you'd be safe. Relief flooded through Daisy. Thank you, Sheriff. After the sheriff departed, Quinn offered Daisy a proposition that surprised her. You could stay here, he said. Work with Alina in the house if you're willing. I pay fair wages, and there's room enough that you'd have your privacy. Daisy studied him, searching for hidden motives but finding only straightforward concern. Why would you take such a risk? She asked. The ranch needs help, Quinn answered simply. Alina's not getting any younger, and I've got 6 hands who can tear through a kitchen like locusts. You'd be doing me a favor, truth be told. They both recognized the excuse for what it was, but Daisy appreciated his attempt to preserve her dignity. She accepted with the condition that she would earn her keep, not accept charity. The days that followed established a tentative routine. Daisy helped Alina with meals and household tasks, finding unexpected comfort in the rhythms of ranch life. Quinn kept his distance, respectful of her circumstances, but always watchful when riders approached or she ventured to the garden alone. 2 weeks after her arrival, Edgar Whitman appeared at the rocking K-gate with 2 men beside him. Daisy spotted them from the kitchen window and froze, the plate in her hands slipping to shatter on the floor. Alina followed her gaze and immediately called for Quinn, who emerged from the barn, rifle in hand but pointed groundward. Stay inside, he told Daisy. Both of you. Through the window, Daisy watched as Quinn walked to meet the men, his posture relaxed but alert. Even from a distance, she could see Edgar's face twisted with rage. Keller, Edgar shouted, I've come for my wife, don't see any misses. Whitman here, Quinn replied, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. Just hands and household staff. Edgar dismounted, striding toward Quinn with his hand hovering near his pistol. She's carrying my child, Keller, that makes her my concern. Striking a woman carrying any child makes you something I won't say in polite company, Quinn responded, not backing down. Now, I suggest you turn around and head back to town. Edgar's face flushed dark. You think because you wear that badge in town sometimes, you can interfere in a man's private matters. The law's on my side. Maybe, Quinn agreed calmly, but there's law and there's what's right. Sometimes they're not the same thing. Edgar's companions shifted uncomfortably, clearly not having signed on for the confrontation developing. One muttered something to Edgar, who brushed him off with an angry gesture. I know she's here, Keller. I'll be back with the full authority of the law, and you'll regret standing between a man and his property. Quinn's voice hardened. A woman isn't property, Whitman. Neither is a child. Remember that when you're deciding your next move. Edgar spat on the ground before remounting. As the 3 men rode away, Daisy released the breath she'd been holding, her hands shaking. That evening, as she and Quinn sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the distant mountains, Daisy finally asked the question that had been forming since her arrival. What did Edgar mean about you wearing a badge sometimes? Quinn glanced at her, then returned his gaze to the horizon. I serve as deputy when Sheriff Morgan needs extra help, not often, but enough that folks know I understand the law. Yet you're helping me defy it, she observed. No law says a woman has to stay where she's beaten, Quinn replied. But Whitman's right about one thing: courts tend to side with husbands in these matters. Daisy absorbed this reality in silence, one hand resting on her stomach where the slightest swell was beginning to show. I'm afraid, she admitted finally. Not just for me anymore, Quinn nodded, understanding in his eyes. Fear keeps us alive sometimes. It's what we do despite it that matters. The following Sunday, Quinn suggested they attend church services in town. Daisy hesitated, knowing Edgar would likely be there, but Quinn explained his reasoning. Hiding makes you look guilty of something. Standing in the light, head high, that tells a different story. With Alina accompanying them as a proper chaperone, Daisy entered the small church with trepidation that transformed to determination when whispers followed their arrival. Edgar sat near the front, turning to stare as they took seats toward the back. The sermon focused on charity and protection of the vulnerable, a coincidence that made Daisy wonder if the minister had been informed of her situation. Throughout the service, she felt Edgar's gaze but refused to cower, drawing strength from Quinn's solid presence beside her. After the service, several women approached Daisy while Quinn spoke with the sheriff nearby. Their curiosity was thinly veiled as concern, but one woman, the doctor's wife, offered genuine kindness. "If you need anything at all, please come to us," she said quietly. "My husband has treated too many accidents in this town." Before Daisy could respond, Edgar approached, his public mask of concern firmly in place. "Daisy, darling," he said, reaching for her hand. "I've been so worried." Daisy stepped back, avoiding his touch. "I'm well, Edgar." "Better than I've been in months." His smile tightened. "You should come home now. This situation is becoming embarrassing." "For whom?" Daisy asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "For the man whose wife fled in fear, or for the wife who bore his marks on her skin?" Several nearby conversations halted, attention turning their way. Edgar's eyes darted to the onlookers, his facade slipping. "You're confused," he hissed. "The child has affected your thinking." "I'm thinking more clearly than ever," Daisy replied. "And I won't return to a home where violence waits." Edgar's hand shot out, gripping her arm with bruising force. "You have no choice," he growled, mask completely discarded. "That's my child you're carrying. Remove your hand." Quinn's voice came from behind her, dangerously quiet. "Now." Edgar's grip tightened momentarily before he released her, turning his fury toward Quinn. "You've turned her against me," he accused, filled her head with notions above her station. "She did that all on her own," Quinn replied. "I just provided a safe place to think." The sheriff arrived then, positioning himself between the men. "This isn't the place, gentlemen. Whitman, I suggest you remember you're in a house of worship." Edgar's jaw worked silently before he turned and stalked away, the whispers following him more numerous than those that had trailed Daisy. As they rode back to the ranch, Daisy felt something shift within her, a realization that she was no longer simply running from Edgar but standing against him. The fear remained, but alongside it grew a determination she hadn't known she possessed. The weeks that followed brought changes both subtle and profound. Daisy's pregnancy became more visible, and with it came a deepening connection to the life growing inside her. She began to plan beyond mere escape, considering what kind of future she could build for her child. Quinn, for his part, maintained his respectful distance while ensuring her safety. He expanded the garden at her suggestion, built shelves for her growing collection of borrowed books, and listened attentively when she spoke of her dreams of perhaps becoming a teacher someday. Their evenings often found them on the porch, where conversation flowed more easily as trust developed between them. Daisy learned of Quinn's childhood in Missouri, his father's death in the war, and his journey west with his mother before her tragic end. He shared stories of building the ranch from nothing, of lean years and hard-won successes. In turn, Daisy spoke of her childhood in Pennsylvania, her father's death from consumption, and her mother's remarriage to a man who viewed Daisy as an unwanted responsibility. She explained how Edgar's courtship had seemed a rescue from that situation, his promises of adventure in the West a dream she had embraced without questioning. "I was so eager to believe in him," she admitted one evening as autumn deepened toward winter. "To believe someone could want me for myself." Quinn considered her words before responding. "Wanting someone means accepting all of them, their dreams alongside your own, their voice alongside your own." Whitman wanted possession, not partnership. The simple wisdom of his statement lingered with Daisy as her 5th month of pregnancy arrived with the first snow of the season. The legal battles Edgar had threatened remained largely talk, though he had filed papers with the territorial court claiming abandonment. Sheriff Morgan kept Quinn informed of developments, warning that Edgar had been drinking heavily and making threats when in his cups. On a December evening, with snow falling gently outside, Daisy felt the first distinct movements of her child, not the flutters she had experienced before, but definite kicks that made her gasp in wonder. Alina was visiting her sister in town, and Quinn was the only one present when Daisy, overcome by emotion, called him into the kitchen. "Quinn, the baby, it's moving," he entered hesitantly, stopping at a respectful distance. "Is everything all right?" "Yes, it's wonderful," she said, tears of joy streaming down her face. Would you like to feel?" The invitation crossed a boundary they had both carefully maintained, and Quinn hesitated, uncertainty in his eyes. "Only if you're comfortable," he said softly. Daisy nodded, taking his weathered hand and placing it gently on the curve of her stomach. For a moment, nothing happened, then a distinct kick pressed against his palm. Quinn's expression transformed, wonder replacing uncertainty as he felt the life beneath his hand. "That's amazing," he whispered, a rare smile spreading across his features. Daisy looked up at him, suddenly aware of their proximity, of the warmth of his hand through the fabric of her dress. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing unspoken for weeks. Quinn seemed to realize it too, slowly withdrawing his hand but maintaining her gaze. "Daisy," he began, then stopped, searching for words. The sound of approaching horses broke the moment. Quinn moved to the window, his expression immediately hardening. "It's Whitman," he said grimly, "with 3 men." Fear shot through Daisy, but it was different now, fear not just for herself but for Quinn and the life they had built at the ranch. "He's drunk," Quinn observed, reaching for his rifle, "and armed. Get to the root cellar and bar the door from inside." "I won't hide while you face him alone," Daisy protested. Quinn turned to her, his expression intense. "Please, Daisy, for the baby," the mention of her child decided her. With reluctance, she moved toward the cellar door but paused as Quinn stepped onto the porch to meet the approaching men. From her position at the kitchen window, Daisy watched as Edgar dismounted unsteadily, his companions remaining on horseback. "Keller," Edgar shouted, slurring slightly. "I'm done waiting. Where's my wife?" "Go home, Whitman," Quinn replied calmly. "You're in no state for this conversation." Edgar pulled his pistol, pointing it with an unsteady hand. "I know she's here. I'll burn this place to the ground if I have to," one of his companions protested. "Edgar, you said we were just talking to him. Put that away." Edgar ignored him, advancing toward the porch. "Last chance, Keller, send her out." Quinn stood his ground, rifle held ready but not raised. "There's no version of this that ends well for you, Whitman. Think about that." Edgar's response was to fire wildly, the shot splintering wood near Quinn's head. Quinn ducked and raised his rifle, but before he could return fire, one of Edgar's companions spurred his horse forward, knocking Edgar off balance. "This is madness," the man shouted. "I'm not party to murder." In the confusion, Edgar's gun discharged again, this time striking one of his own men in the leg. The injured man cried out, his horse rearing in panic. Sheriff Morgan's voice suddenly cut through the chaos. "Drop the weapon, Whitman, now." The sheriff and his deputy emerged from the shadows at the edge of the property, guns drawn. Edgar, seeing himself suddenly outnumbered, turned his rage toward the house. "This is your fault," he screamed, firing at the windows where Daisy stood watching. Glass shattered around her as she ducked, a cry escaping her lips. The sound of another shot followed, then silence. When Daisy cautiously raised her head, she saw Edgar on his knees in the yard, clutching his shoulder where Quinn's shot had struck him. The sheriff was already moving to disarm him, while Quinn rushed back toward the house. "Daisy." His voice was frantic as he burst through the door. "Are you hurt?" She rose shakily, glass crunching beneath her feet. "No, I'm all right, the baby too." Relief flooded his features as he crossed to her, carefully checking for injuries despite her assurances. Outside, the sheriff was reading Edgar his rights, listing charges that included attempted murder. "It's over," Quinn said softly, helping her to a chair. "He won't hurt you again." As the reality of Edgar's defeat sank in, Daisy began to tremble, months of fear and tension finally finding release. Quinn knelt beside her, his strong hands gently covering hers. "You're safe now," he promised. "Both of you." In the aftermath, as the sheriff took statements and Edgar was loaded into a wagon bound for the town jail, Daisy found herself seated on the porch beside Quinn, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, watching as the last of the riders disappeared down the road. "You risked everything for someone you barely knew." Quinn turned to her, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "I know you now," he said simply. "And I'd do it again without hesitation." Their eyes held, the emotion between them no longer possible to ignore. "When I first found you on that road," Quinn continued quietly, "I thought I was helping you escape something. I didn't realize I was finding something I never knew I was missing." Daisy's heart swelled at his words. "I was running away," she admitted, "but somehow I ended up running toward something far better." As winter deepened into the new year of 1877, Edgar Whitman faced trial for attempted murder and assault. The testimonies of Daisy, Quinn, and several townswomen who came forward with their own stories of Edgar's violence ensured his conviction. When the judge sentenced him to 15 years in the territorial prison, Daisy felt the last weight of fear lift from her shoulders. With her freedom legally secured, Daisy faced new decisions about her future. The answer came more naturally than she expected, emerging from the life she and Quinn had already begun building together. Their wedding was a simple affair in early February, performed by the minister with Alina, Sheriff Morgan, and a handful of ranch hands as witnesses. As they stood together before the altar, Daisy felt her child stir within her, as if offering approval of the man who had promised to protect them both. In April, when the first wildflowers dotted the ranch meadows, Daisy gave birth to a daughter with Alina and the doctor's wife attending. Quinn paced the porch until the newborn's cries announced her arrival, then entered with reverent steps to find Daisy tired but radiant, a tiny bundle cradled in her arms. "She's perfect," Daisy whispered, lifting the blanket to reveal a small face with her own auburn curls. Quinn approached cautiously, overcome by the sight of them together. When Daisy offered the baby to him, he took her with gentle hands that belied his strength, cradling her as though she were made of spun glass. "What will you name her?" he asked, voice rough with emotion. Daisy watched them together, this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved, and the daughter who represented not her past pain but her future joy. "Hope," she decided. "Her name is Hope." Quinn's eyes met hers over their daughter's head, understanding and love flowing between them. "Hope Keller," he said softly. "It suits her." As the baby dozed in his arms, Quinn sat carefully beside Daisy on the bed. "She has your determination," he observed. "Already fought her way into the world with such strength." "And your sense of timing," Daisy replied with a smile, "arriving just as the land comes back to life." When Hope began to fuss, Quinn carefully returned her to Daisy's arms, watching with wonder as mother and daughter settled together. The moment held a sacred quality, a family forged not from blood but from choice and love. "I never thought I'd have this," Quinn admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "A family of my own." Daisy reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. "Hope may not have your blood," she said, "but she will have your heart, your name, and your example to follow. That makes her yours in all the ways that truly matter." In the quiet of their bedroom, with spring sunshine streaming through the windows and new life cradled between them, Quinn Keller made a promise to both the woman who had claimed his heart and the child he would raise as his own. "I'll protect you both with everything I am," he vowed. "And I'll make sure Hope grows up knowing only love in this house, never fear, never doubt." As the years passed, the rocking K Ranch prospered along with its family. Daisy eventually opened a small school on the property, teaching not only Hope but the children of neighboring ranches. Quinn's role as deputy expanded to town council member, where he advocated for laws protecting women and children from abuse. Hope grew into a spirited girl with her mother's quick mind, and her father's steady courage. Though she eventually learned the truth of her birth, it changed nothing in her relationship with Quinn, who had been her father in every way that mattered from her first breath. When Hope was 5, twins joined the family, a boy and girl who inherited Quinn's dark hair and thoughtful nature. The Keller home, once simply a rancher's practical dwelling, became known throughout the territory as a place of warmth, learning, and refuge. Sometimes, on summer evenings when the children played in the yard under Alina's watchful eye, Daisy and Quinn would sit on the porch where they had first begun to know each other, her hand tucked securely in his. "Did you ever imagine this?" she would ask, watching their children's laughter illuminate the gathering dusk. And Quinn, the man who had once lived alone with his ghosts, would look at the family that had blossomed from a single act of kindness on a dusty road, and answer with simple truth. "No," he would say, drawing her closer. "I imagined survival. You taught me to imagine joy."